column. Beau is a social and political commenter who strives to encourage the creation of community level networks to address immediate problems and then leverage those networks to address larger national issues. His primary platform is YouTube, but he can be found on most social media platforms. And if you're familiar with him, you'll be thrilled to see him here. And if he's new to you, you're in for a great surprise and a nice treat. Beau, welcome. Think you're on mute.
There we go. Okay. So how's everybody doing today? You know, the theme that y'all have going on today is it's kind of fitting with everything else that's going on in the world. For a whole lot of people that are sitting here watching this, you know, you're struggling to try to get those around you because we're in rural areas. You know, we are kind of isolated. We don't have a lot of infrastructure to help us out when we're trying to organize people. You know, you're by yourself, and for a long time you have been able to rely on a dynamic that's kind of shifting now. You know, under Trump, it was easy to get people active. It was easy to get people out there because, I mean, there was that constant pressure. There was something that people viewed as an attack. So it was easy to get people motivated. And now that is not so present. You know, Trumpism, all of that stuff, it's still there, but it's not as present. It's not in your face every single day. It's harder to keep people engaged because they're not doing it out of self-defense. You know, they're not, for a lot of people who got active under Trump, they didn't want to be politically active. They didn't have a choice. They themselves were under attack in some way. And now that isn't as present, it's harder to keep people motivated. You know, you don't have that unifying opposition, that target that everybody can direct their stuff towards. Now you can't fight against something and you have to switch it to something else. And it's fitting that, you know, the Ukraine was mentioned earlier, because if I look like I've been awake for 3 days, it's because I've been covering that. But one of the things that I've noticed is Zelensky, the president in Ukraine, when he's motivating the people that are around him, when he's trying to motivate his country to get in a literal fight, he's not talking about their enemy. He's not talking about the person that's attacking them. He's saying that we're going to fight for our kids. We're going to fight for our communities. He's talking about what they love, not what they hate. And that is one of the things that has brought him around and made him the international leader that a former comedian has become. If you're not familiar with his background, if this happened in the United States, it's basically Jon Stewart became president and now he has to do a Red Dawn, and he's succeeding. So that trick is something that we can all use in the areas where we are, because we're behind enemy lines in a way too, much in a very different way. But we have to switch and start motivating people by what they love rather than what they hate, rather than what they're afraid of. We have to get them in the fight for something, not against something. And for us, that's hard because the American left, as it is, it's a coalition. You know, that it's not like the Republican Party in the sense where everybody wants the status quo or they want to go backwards. People want something better. And it may be liberals or, you know, social democrats or leftists all falling into this coalition. And what they view as better is different. So it's not as unified when you're talking about what they love, what they're willing to fight for. So that leaves y'all as organizers in the unenviable position of teaching people about solidarity and teaching people about showing up for each other, even if it's not a cause that is directly dear to your heart. You show up because they're going to show up for you, and you can find that common ground. It's like I was telling them earlier, my wife, her main causes, it's kids, pets, and vets. That's what she cares about. For me, it's, more wild animals. So if those are your groups, you can probably make the case that helping the wild animals would help the pets and vice versa. And you can build that coalition around some small unifying factor, and you can get people to show up for each other. And that multiplies the number of people you can have involved in any activity. And then the other problem is you got to get the people there to begin with now, right? And in the South or in rural areas, I'm looking at the chat where y'all were from, and it's not just the super rural deep South that I tend to picture. Where most of us live, 30% of the population at most is part of that coalition, is part of that group that wants changes for the better, that wants progress in some way, that wants to move the country forward. And in rural areas, you're talking about people who are generally, by stereotype and by my personal experience, people who are fiercely independent. We don't want people telling us what to do. We don't normally want to show up for a bunch of meetings. We don't want to show up for this. We have to be motivated to do that. And in my experience, it's been easier to make it a social event of some kind, that have people show up for that. Brunch is still canceled, but we can have a barbecue so we can get some stuff done. And that's one of the things that we're going to have to start to focus on, is the different tactics to get people to show up, because there's not an outrage that we can harness and get people to show up somewhere. We have to get people active by bringing them together and saying, okay, this is what we can do. These are the activities we can use to facilitate change. And in doing that, it's probably easier to do it in a social situation. And if you frame it in that way, you have more people show up. More people show up if there's punch and pie type of thing. And that's when you can get your signatures on your petitions. That's when you can get meet your ballot requirements. That's when you can set up other events. And most importantly, that's when you can instill that solidarity, because then it's not just about that unifying cause. That's also your friend that you met at the barbecue, at whatever it is, whatever the event is. And, I know in times where there is less activity or there's less wins, it gets disheartening, because we're kind of out here alone. We don't see a lot of friendly messaging on bumper stickers on trucks or cars around us. It's normally advertising stuff we don't necessarily agree with. So we feel isolated at times. And it's important to remember that reason, you being isolated, you being one of the few there, makes your work that much more important. You're in an area that needs it the most. So I guess that's actually all I had to open up with. I'm sure I have additional time I'm supposed to fill. I don't know how y'all would like to fill it.
I think you actually we're right on schedule. Want you to see there's a lot of love and appreciation for you here in the chat, Beau.